If the pain in your chest is not caused by some underlying condition, then chances are it's caused by tight muscles thanks to bad posture. And sadly, stretching it isn't going to work because it's not just the muscles that are tight, it's also the fascia system, which is why you need to do this simple 10-minute routine to loosen your tight chest. Let's get started. The first thing you need to do is apply some lotion or balm to your chest so that your tool can easily glide over it. Now to get started, we're going to be working on the clavicle, also known as the collarbone, which is the bone right above the chest. And there's going to be two ways we're going to be doing this. But to make this even easier for you to access, I recommend doing this in a seated position with the arm you're working on an elevated surface. This is going to help pull the clavicle away from the chest and allow easier access. First, start off right near the center, right next to the sternum, and then gently scrape across the clavicle, going with light to medium pressure. When you hit the end of it, go ahead and reverse that action and glide back to the sternum and then repeat for a few passes. Now, as I'm dragging across the clavicle, I'm also trying to dig a little bit underneath it to open up the tissues a little more. Just something you can try out as you're doing this. And once you're done with a few passes going across the clavicle, we're now going to be trying to scrape everything away from it, which is when we really want to get underneath that clavicle so we can get as much tissues into our tool and then pull it away. The whole idea here is that you're trying to create some kind of separation basically between the clavicle and the chest. So when the chest is moving, the clavicle isn't always getting pulled with it, allowing easier range of motion and mobility. Once again, perform about 2 to 3 passes. Now let's move into the sternum. Take your tool and starting at the top, begin scraping away from the sternum. But immediately you're going to notice that you run into some bony areas, which are your ribs. Now what you're going to do here is basically go in between the ribs and on both edges of the ribs, treating it similar to how you did the collarbone, trying to get underneath and separate those tissues. Do this for roughly 1 to 2 passes throughout the entire sternum. Now that we've opened up the chest by working out the edges of it, it's time to actually work on the muscle itself. First, start off by putting the muscle on a stretch. This is going to make the scraping technique a lot easier and a lot more effective. Now start off by gently scraping out the entire pec major, looking for areas that feel gritty, almost like it's sand underneath some paper or some cloths. These are the areas you're going to be returning to later on after we're done warming it up. Now, a quick warning for anyone who has any extra fatty tissues on top of their muscle. What you're going to want to do here is simply use your other hand and pull those tissues away so you can work on the underlying muscle. And instead of scraping across the chest, looking for your little gritty areas, it might be a little easier for you to start from the center and work your way out as opposed to just going across the entire chest. Again, do what's comfortable for you in your specific situation. Now, after warming up the muscle, it's time to target those little gritty areas. Find a spot that you want to work on and begin performing small strokes across that gritty area. Perform about 3 to 5 small strokes going in one direction, and then change your directions and then perform another 3 to 5 strokes. Now, the idea here is that you're performing constantly different strokes in different directions here, looking for the most tender spot, the area that feels the most stuck, the most gritty whenever you are doing these scraping techniques. Because when you find the area that feels the most tender or feels the grittiest, that's the area you kind of want to focus on and maybe double up or maybe even triple up those strokes to try to get that little grittiness out. Now, for the technique, I highly recommend looking for about 1 to 3 different gritty areas within the pec major. So now that you're done actually loosening up the fascia over the muscle, we can actually stretch out the muscle itself. Put your elbow up against the wall at roughly 90 degrees. Now from here, use that as a block as you step forward to create a small stretch in the pec major. From here, rotate away from the wall in order to increase that stretch. And once you get into that stretch, then simply hang out there and relax into it for 1 minute for each side. Or if that's too long, then break it up into 2 sets for 30 seconds each. Or you can just grab a monster band attached to the wall and use that as your stretching technique. Probably one of my favorites because it's constantly pulling and adding tension. Make sure to do this treatment roughly 3 to 4 times a week for a few weeks to get some crazy results. And to understand why this actually works, make sure to click on the video up in this corner. Or if you want to check out my newest video, click on the video up here.